Yeah.
I was just in another meeting and I just got out and I'm not quite all together.
Okay.
yet.
We'll wait for a minute. You get ready and then I'll restart us.
No, go ahead.
Okay, great.
We're recording
Excellent.
now.
Excellent.
So please be aware, everyone, that we are recording.
Okay, yes. I'll call us to order. And tonight we're going to approve 2 sets of minutes. So I sent out the first set last week, but then I sent both sets again when I sent the agenda on Sunday. So hopefully you've seen them. The first one is the February minutes, and the last one is the minutes from our last meeting on March 3rd. So let's start with the February minutes. Did everyone have a chance to review them? Excellent. Okay. Why don't we do it by a show of hands on the side? First, may I have a motion to approve the February minutes? Great. May I have a second? Okay, great. I have a motion and a second. Now, all who approve, why don't you raise your hands on the side? And just keep them up for a bit. If I can have a couple more votes. Okay, Chuck, do we have can you see the votes? Is that I think that's a pass. Okay, we're passed. Thank you. Any opposed? Actually, everyone put your hands down. Okay, we just need 3 more hands down. So if everyone can take their hands down, you can check the hands and make sure your hands are down. 2 more to come down. 1 more. There we go. Okay, any opposed? Okay, great. And the next one is the set of minutes for the March 3rd meeting. Did everyone have a chance to look at them? Any comments? Okay, may I have a motion to approve the March 3rd minutes? Great. May I have a second? Okay, I see 1 and 2. Now may I have those in favor to approve them? Great. Okay, thank you. All the hands can come down. Excellent. Just a couple more hands to come down. Okay, anyone opposed? Valerie, is that an opposed? Your hand just hasn't come down yet. No, hands down. Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, great. Minutes are approved. Excellent. Okay, now let's go to public comments. Josh,
I guess that's me.
Yep.
So I will turn my camera on just briefly to wave at everybody and say hi so you know I exist. I am going to be quite brief because I know we have a lot to go on tonight. When I'm done my comments, I will put in the chat the county board work session. The Commission on the Status of Women in Arlington Commission spoke beautifully on the need to compensate APS employees fully. And it was the last 10 minutes of the county work session. So it's worth your time to hear that commission standing up for employees. Just 2 thoughts. The first one, if you did watch the work session last night on compensation, one thing, the word that just kept coming into my mind was "and." When they talked about the step or the COLA, and I think it's important to say that it is an "and," it's both. What they talk about often is the hourly employees who do not benefit from a step. And I will say to that the AEA has been advocating for years to put absolutely every employee on a step scale. And just because they're on a step scale does not inherently mean that they have to be granted benefits or a guarantee of future employment. So that is just one thing that I'll say on that. The other thing I will talk about is that all the other comments I would have added, Melanie and I have had a couple conversations, and my thoughts, she understands them, and I'm going to listen in on the whole meeting so that if there's a place where you think, Melanie, that I could offer the the teachers and staff input, I would be more than happy to add that. So I look forward to the discussion, and anything I can add, please, I'd be happy to hear it.
Okay. Thank you, Josh. Great. Okay. Monique, thank you for joining us tonight. We missed you last week, but Christina was a wonderful addition to our group, given that she knows the back so well. And so I'm going to give you a chance to welcome us tonight and give you your thoughts on the budget, since we heard hers last week, but we welcome yours as well.
Thanks so much, Melanie. I do appreciate your indulgence. And I'm sorry I could not attend the last meeting, but I'm very happy to attend this evening. I want to thank everyone for all the hard work. This is where the rubber hits the road. We appreciate you digging deeply into the budget. I was able to read your draft memo that you're considering sending to the board. I thought the ideas were creative, well thought out, and I could tell that you were working very hard on the budget and trying to give us some ideas when we're facing such a big deficit. I think the biggest thing that's happened since you guys wrote that memo is it looks like Congress has moved forward and has passed this stimulus package for the nation to respond to COVID. What we've heard is that, and I don't want to steal any of Leslie's thunder, but the estimate we're hearing is that we could receive more than $20 million for that. Of course, that will go a long way to our $42 million budget deficit gap. And so I think that can help us as we're looking forward. I think what I read in your draft memo is that you are looking not for us to be able to benefit from one-time whammies, but to basically be looking in the future about how we can make sure that our spending is in line with our needs in the community. And I think that that's something we can be looking at as we move forward, and we'll be interested in your ideas. I think Leslie may be able to think about what we're looking at in the future as we try to figure out what our closeout might be this year. And we also, I think one of the big issues that we heard over the last few days since you guys have met, of course, hopefully you were able to listen in our last budget work session, but we were able to hear from our employees. They had some creative ideas for us to consider. Of course, there is concern around the idea of not being able to, at this point in the superintendent's proposed budget, being able to offer both a step and a COLA. The COLA is being offered at 2% because it will help us take advantage of more than $600,000 that we could receive from the state if we were able to offer that. If we are not able to offer that, the superintendent has offered a $500 one-time bonus. We heard from some of our employees they would like to see $1,000 instead, if that is where we need to go. Those are two of the, I think, interesting takeaways. And we also heard from some of our employees that they would like to see compensation for when they receive additional accreditations in their ability to do work, whether that might be for possibly learning a new program on the computer or something like that. So we're hearing that some of our non-teacher staff members would like to be able to be compensated in other ways. Those are some of the major takeaways. I'm happy to continue to listen in, and if you guys have questions for me that I can possibly try to answer, I'd be happy to do that. However, I just want to make the point that at this point, a lot of the board members are listening and asking questions. I cannot speak on behalf of the full board on where we are on any particular item, except I think I would be safe in saying that everyone's very excited to see the bill passed today. Thank you.
Yep, certainly big news for today. So thank you. And thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts. We appreciate that. Okay. Any questions for Monique before you disappear? Any questions directly for Monique? We're having lots of discussion tonight, but any questions on Monique's initial comments? Okay.
I'll be here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Leslie, and first I want to thank you because you shared other questions and answers with us already this weekend, and then you got as many quick answers as you could to our probably longer list of questions than you had hoped for when you made that very nice offer for us to send questions. And thank you for getting as many answers as you could out quickly. So every answer is much appreciated. But wanted to let you share any updates on the process, or I guess on numbers, and that there's a pretty big update that has come through on numbers, but just anything that would help us in our discussions and deliberations. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Melanie. I was going to talk about the American Rescue Plan. Monique did indicate that, depending on what is still in the plan, we could receive up to $20.5 million. And I will put a big asterisk on that because it will come with some caveats. The first caveat that came that we know of right away is that 20% of those funds have to be used for learning loss. So right there, $5 million have to be set aside for learning loss. Whatever that looks like. It could be summer learning, it could be other things. So it can't go to, we have to be careful that we don't just say, okay, now we've got 20.5, now our deficit's only 22 million. We have to look closely at what that 20.5 can fund of the things that are in our budget already. So it's going to take a little bit of time before we can come up with an answer, because obviously it's not even been signed into law yet. So we don't have any idea at this point exactly how much money we'll be getting and what the stipulations on those funds will be. And that will be very important as we look towards closing the FY22 gap. I don't know if everybody has seen that the mid-year report is coming to the school board tomorrow evening. It's been posted on Board Docs since Friday. The long and the short of it is that with all of the ins and outs on revenue and all of the ins and outs on expenditures, we are projecting at this moment that we will have just under $13 million left at closeout. So we are projecting at this point that on June 30, when we close the books, we'll have $13 million left from this year. And we are not recommending that we do anything with that $13 million at this point, because those are the funds that would replenish our reserves from what we use for the FY22 budget. So if we really do only end up with $13 million, or as much as $13 million, depending on how the rest of the year goes, that would be what we would use to replenish our reserves, which is not that much when we're considering using, a large portion of the reserves that we have on hand right now. And I think that's all I had as far as updates.
Okay. Any questions for Leslie on those topics specifically? Okay. Okay, great. And now here's what I propose. Hopefully you all saw and got a chance to read through. So thank you to all of you who have spent a lot of time on the budget, and it showed. I was really pleased. We got back some very thoughtful comments from the group on the budget, and what I had wanted to do was make sure that they felt heard, and certainly given the amount of comments I got, and we rolled them all up together. I know that people spent a good deal of time on the budget, so thank you. And I sent that document out on Sunday, so you all had a chance to read it. What I want to do is go through that document. We're not going to go through it point by point. It's too many pages to go through it point by point. But what I do want to go through is section by section for additional comments or input by folks. So I have a little bit of additional group discussion or input, so I know how we want to revise it going forward from tonight, because I have your initial round of comments. And I think that it would be helpful to know what it is the group input, having read the whole thing. So I will do some discussion tonight, and then I'll do a very similar thing where people can send me their comments based on having read the document in full and having had the benefit of tonight's discussion. We'll do the same thing as I'll have people send me their comments by Saturday, and I will spend time on them again and get another version out so we can revise the version that you see, because some people may feel like when we rolled all our comments up together, we may have asked to take too many things out of the budget, or made suggestions that when we rolled them up, they felt like did or didn't work well together. And so we'll definitely give people another round, but want to give some chance on that tonight. I do know that Leslie sent out some answers to people's questions, so some of those questions may come up tonight, and that's fine. We have Leslie here to answer some of those questions if people feel like they really need some answers in order to have the discussion. And also Monique is here too to help guide us in terms of if there are some larger discussion points that we feel like we really do want board input on as we go through this. But what I'm going to ask, because this is a discussion, I'm going to ask people to actually turn their cameras on, because when we're having a discussion where we're sort of deep in thought about something this important, it shouldn't be me looking at 10 initials, but it really should be a group discussion where we're looking at each other and having a discussion really about something that we're all working on and collaborating on together. So thank you for all coming back on. There's no document to look at. It's really a discussion around, hopefully you all have access to that document I sent out, or when we're looking at it, you have your top line thoughts about what you're thinking about it. I don't know, I've got kind of a few of you. Can a few more of you come back on camera so we can have a nice group discussion? Sort of half the group not ready to come back on camera to have a group discussion? Or maybe stepped away and don't want anyone to know? Not really here? Okay. Well, if you feel like you can come on camera and have a discussion with us, that's much appreciated. But thank you to those of you who felt like you could. Okay, so I want to start with the way we broke it out as we did overall observations. So, or people feeling about the budget overall, and obviously I have rolled up comments from a number of different folks, and so what I tried to do is create some harmony out of the comments. But obviously we've got some different opinions on the committee. And then to break it down, as you know, into commentary on the different expense sections. And then because we were, as a committee, asking the board to reconsider certain things that were important to either many of us or a couple of us, we did put in other suggestions that people found in the budget and said, hey, here are some alternatives that may not be as important to us as a group, because if we're going to address a large budget deficit and we want to rethink some of the cuts, then we obviously have to come up with other cuts. And in fact, Monique, I'll use Reed as an example. I have a friend who wrote to, maybe Monique, you as well, but definitely shared the note she got back from Reed. She had something that was very much on her mind, and she wrote to Reed and said, this is very important to me. And he said, I understand, but we have a lot of cuts in this budget. So if there's something that's very important to you, help me find other offsetting cuts that you could live with, so that I understand what you might be able to trade off in a budget in order to get the things that are important to you. And so she was looking in the budget. She called me. She knew I was the head of the budget advisory committee. Said, how would I even do this? And so I just talked to her around, here's how, for example, we, the committee, are doing this. The budget's pretty big. I sent her a copy. I talked to her about the exercise. And so that is essentially the exercise that we did, is said, these things may be very important to us as a group. Can you please consider these things instead? And that's essentially the document that I think you all saw, which was offering other cuts in lieu of, or instead of, or maybe in addition to some of the ones that are in the document, depending on how much reserves we want to use. Okay, so I will stop talking, but I want to frame it for everyone. And I'd love to get some thoughts on the top line comments that are in here around the thoughts that the proposed cuts are too short term. There's a need for more structural change. We should partner with the county, but we can't count on it. Enrollment expectations should be further evaluated and likely adjusted downward. and sort of a question around why did we reinstate all of the FY21 one-year reductions, so that we started kind of with a higher base maybe than we needed to, instead of looking at them a little bit more individually, and not sort of reinstating them all as a group. So those were the top line thoughts I got from this group. So wanted to get some reaction if people are agreeing with those, disagreeing with those, and just get some sort of commentary from this group. Valerie, you're talking, but I think you're on. Valerie, were you talking to us? I think you're on mute. And actually, people raise their hands, then that might be easier. But so, yeah, Valerie, why don't you go first, and then I'll think Chuck is afterwards. But Valerie, why don't you go first? I think you started to talk.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I sort of looked at the comments that you had sent, and I think I had raised a question with the group about teacher accreditation, and looking at teacher accreditation and the national certification as a wedge or a gauge of the professionalism of the staff, because the biggest part of the budget is the teaching or instructional aspect, which is more your structural concern. But what I noted, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, I looked at the superintendent's executive summary, and going through it, he gave a lot of highlights, but what I failed to see, and maybe somebody else could correct me, I failed to see the raw data on the accomplishments of the students or the SOLs as a gauge of where are we with the students. It's like, what are their scores on the SOLs in terms of the standards from the state? That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, on page 7 of his summary, he talks about the accreditation being waived. And so I wanted to know, what is being waived? What accreditation? What schools? Is it our entire district? The accreditation being waived, and I do understand that because of COVID that we would have some issues there, but I would like to know if anybody can answer, have we had accreditation before? Who's accredited in the system? What are the standard SOL? What is the SOL data? Where are the children?
So Leslie, can you come on and can you answer Valerie's questions around where she can find the SOL data and what that comment around accreditation is?
Right. So the comment around accreditation was that the superintendent of public instruction waived annual school accreditation for the 21-22 academic school year. This is not just for Arlington Public Schools. This is for the entire state of Virginia. So because spring 2020 SOL tests were not held, so there is no SOL data from spring of 2020 for there to be a calculation of accreditation, nor are there any results as a result because we didn't have any testing in the spring of 2020.
Well, what about prior to 2020? 2019, 2018, 19 school system?
You can find all of our SOL results on our website.
Okay. And in the accreditation of the district, are we an accredited school district?
Yes, all of our schools are accredited or have been accredited in the past.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you, Leslie. Chuck?
I think it'll just be important, if we think about how we're going to have to compete as a subdivision of the county budget. But obviously, in our case, we have a predicted, really flat line of revenue over the next 3 years, but the costs obviously are accelerating over at least next 3 to 4 years until we hit kind of the peak enrollment, and then you would assume at some point that's going to stabilize. I don't know how the other portions of the county, if they share that kind of same profile, does say Park and Recreation, does their revenue to cost profile look similar or different? But I guess my concern is, given that environment, if we believe revenue is going to be relatively constant the next, say 3 years while the economy continues to recover, I'm just having a hard time seeing how we get ourselves out of, a projected $111 million deficit. And I know that will, change based on, what we do this year. But I think the long-term health of the budget isn't sustainable. And, we can't make it up all in cost. We're not going to be able to make it all up in revenue raise. But I guess, what's the right balance we're going to have to strike as a county for all the things that have to be funded with tax dollars, be it, police, fire, health and safety, et cetera. I just, not really a question, but I think just the next 3 to 4 years as a county, I don't know that we're on the right footing to meet these different needs, given the revenue and cost structures we currently have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, Catherine.
I saw something on the aquatics budget today, but this is going to have a broader point, and that is for the opening of the Longbridge pool. That's a county Parks and Recreation thing. All of the startup costs they're counting on getting from corporate sponsors. So wow, what a change! And they're not even considering covering anything but barely covering the operating costs by fees and by sustainable ongoing revenue. So I thought that was kind of an interesting, and it's a little following up from Chuck said. I mean, the structure of it is it's totally unsustainable by tax funds. And so when I looked at the that memo, Melanie, that somebody mentioned about, again, it's similar to what Chuck just said about the structural change. And I know that when I was reading the budget and thinking about it, I was just thinking about pandemic and the next 18 months and $50 million and that kind of crisis grips us. But 3 to 5 years, what's the story? Because we're all going to have, there's going to be more expenses, more kids, and if we haven't done the hard work of questioning some of our structural situation, I think it's not realistic that the tax revenue is going to make up that difference.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay. Deidre?
I always forget when I'm on and off mute. I liked this overall benchmarking in the beginning. I thought it was great. I guess the overall observations. I guess I would second just the two comments that have been made thus far, and that's the need for structural changes. I did have one issue in terms of structural changes can include the following. And one of the things that we offer there is consider eliminating the option school programs. I'm not certain that the elimination of the option school programs actually is a cost reducing measure. In my mind, in the studies I've seen, option school programs cost just as much as any other program. So in my mind, unless we can actually back that up with data, it would be my preference to delete that. But perhaps we can include something like, on the bullet of evaluate our administrative versus school costs, think about, some of the options we've noted below that talk about pay for activities, sliding fee scale, that sort of thing that could opt the income stream, at least from sort of like the activities aspect and the administrative costs.
Okay. Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, I mean, again, I agree that I think it's great that we're calling out the need for structural changes up front. Again, given 95% of our budget is in salary and compensation, our operating fund, and 80% of the overall fund, we have to figure out a way to balance that long term against the other needs, because all we end up doing is cutting out the other things every single year, right? And that's okay. We have to recognize that then as a community, we're just going to provide less services, less options, and in which case we're moving kind of a core curriculum, and there are less in high schools, and maybe there need to be fewer options, and maybe we need maybe option schools are a luxury that we just can't afford. There is a cost, and maybe from a from a classroom perspective, there may not be a huge difference, but there's certainly a transportation cost difference, right? So we at some point we have to make the structural changes, or we have to just decide that we can't support some of the luxuries that have actually given Arlington Public Schools a great reputation. Right? Our home values are tied to the fact that we have great public schools. At some point, we may have to go to the county and say, hey, here's what we need to do. If we either need a higher percentage of the budget, or we have to look at cutting some of our services that make us give some of those luxuries that we provide to our students that other school districts don't get, and let them choose whether, as a county, that's something we want for our community. I think that might be something we need to consider.
Yep. Okay. I'm just going to take one little break from the hands. I'm coming back to the hands because we had a couple of comments in the chat. So I'm going over the chat for a minute, and then I'm coming back to hands. Okay. So I think Josh said he has his ACTC hat on, and he is agreeing that there are higher transportation costs for the option schools. That things have been done to try and defray that, but it is still a higher cost. That's with his ACTC hat on. Chuck had asked, would eliminating those have a knock-on effect in terms of class size and therefore less FTEs? I mean, I think that we have seen there is some data that says that, for example, HB Woodlawn does have smaller class size than some of the other schools in the county. And so therefore that's an option school that has lower class size. And so, I mean, I don't have the definitive data on that, but that's certainly a question that we could ask. And then Chuck, you said we still need the seats, but it would mean less movement around the county. And no, actually Josh said to Chuck, we still need the seats. That's true. You still use the buildings, but it would mean less movement around the county. Okay, I'm going to go back to the hands. So give me a sec. Valerie, your hand is up, but I think it's up from the beginning. Is that correct, Valerie? Your hand is still up because you're at the top of the list, which would mean that you were still up from the beginning. If that's the case, Valerie, if you don't mind putting your hand down, so I just know how people's orders, because it comes up based on the order. Juan, you're next.
All right, first of all, I'd like to say good evening, everyone. One of the things I want to echo everything that all the other members have stated thus far. I think this is a real opportunity this year to take a look back at the last couple of years' recommendations, take those first in mind, but also look at, as we move forward, to try to identify and make recommendations to the board, look at some phased in approaches to some of the budget items. And as stated by Chuck, I think one of the things that we have to do as a committee is to look at a long-term approach, because somewhere down the line, I think that the budget is really going to bite us in a negative way. And I think the BAC has a real opportunity not to deviate so much from past years' recommendations, but to put some of those recommendations back on the table to the school board to state that these are some firm things that we're looking at. I know the pandemic was different this year, but I think looking back at some of the recommendations from the previous years is a solid basis for us to move forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Juan. Okay, Julie, you're next.
Sorry, couldn't get my mute button off. So I agree with almost everything that has been said, and I think you did a fantastic job compiling all of these many comments. It's really an impressive document. One thing that and this is my first year on the back, so I come at it kind of wondering, well, what is our role, and what can an advisory committee do? It's obviously the school board's job to look at the budget as a whole. And I was just trying to think about what role can our committee play in terms of supporting the school the school board and the superintendent's office, et cetera, in developing the budget. And the role that I think is really important is to look at the holistic approach. And I definitely think the deficits in the out years stand out to me in ways when I think a lot of folks who look at this are going to be focused on, rightly, the immediate cuts. Is this going to impact the things that, I think are priorities? I would love for us to make sure, and I think this document certainly includes that, keeping that bigger picture in mind of, okay, maybe we do need to make, I think we are going to need to make a lot of cuts this year to, even with the 20 million, to balance the budget, but what can we propose to do going forward to try to address some of the longer term situations? So I think the things that folks are saying make a lot of sense. One area that would be helpful, and I don't know if this is possible, but I'll throw it out there as something that would be helpful, and we can decide that it is or isn't, but to get us just a ballpark sense of some of these, like, one area that seemed of interest to me was just the idea of having fees to participate in certain extracurriculars. I have no idea if that's a minor offset or a major offset. Like, I have no idea the magnitude of some of these potential things that we're looking at. And so to the extent we can get any, and I know it's very hard to say, oh, it'd be about, and that it doesn't work that way, but if we, had any kind of ballpark idea of some of the different levers that can be pulled, that would be really helpful, I think, going forward to just assess what we want to focus on. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, Nellie?
Melly, can I just chime in here for a second?
Sure, yeah, yep.
I don't know exactly what page it's on, but I know that in one of the tiers, there is a proposal for a pay-to-play. Let's see if I can find it. And it was proposed, but it's it's like $25,000, maybe $50,000 at the outside, I think.
But I don't think that was for everything. I think that was for like a set of frisbee
it's for pay to play for students participating in athletics and VHSL activities to include ultimate frisbee, crew, and rifle. I don't think it was only those. I think it was to include those because those are not VHSL activities or athletics in the same way that our football and volleyball and basketball and all of those sports are. So there was an estimate made, and I think it was somewhere around $25,000, $30,000 that we could get from that. Maybe it would be more, I don't know, but it certainly wouldn't be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Leslie, doesn't that say for all athletics?
It does.
Did you? Yeah, okay. I thought you excluded some.
No, I did not exclude. Okay. It says for students participating in athletics and VHSL activities.
Yeah,
and
I see it.
Then there was a caveat to say it would include ultimate frisbee, crew, and rifle because those are not VHSL activities. And so they wanted to, I think, point that out that yes, this pay to play would in fact accrue to those three activities. It's on page 121.
121, yeah.
Okay, Nellie?
That was just to address Julie's question about magnitude, right?
Yeah.
So it's
actually, let me just follow on that, which is, Leslie, how much have we looked at what fees our neighboring districts put in place across all of the activities? Like what fees we have for athletics, band, and other student activities versus what fees are in place in other districts?
I'm not sure that we've done, I don't know. I have not done a study. It's possible that the health and PE Supervisor has done a study. I don't know, it hasn't been shared with me. I don't know if she looked at what other districts were doing, and that's why they came up with this proposal. But I'm not aware of one. I could try to find out if we've looked at any of that.
It would just be curious just to see, if we're tracking in line with what our neighboring districts are doing versus if that's just not something people have benchmarked, and therefore there may be other districts which are just charging more fees across the board, obviously all on a sliding scale for equity, because that's a big theme of ours, and should be. But if this is the difference between us being able to do programs and not do programs, if they can be, the more they can be self-funded, the more we can offer. And obviously, if we could offer them all for free, we would love that, but we're looking at a big deficit. And so the more we can save, if it can be fee funded, that would be a wonderful thing. Okay.
Right. I want to also provide a little bit of perspective on what we're talking about when we're talking about fees, because fees, we don't have a lot of money in local fees in our budget. We have about $24 million total in the budget for that accrue from local fees. But when you look at that, you have to look at the fact that $14.5 million of that is in the Community Activities Fund and accrues primarily from our Extended Day program and from our Aquatics program. Another $4.5 million is in the Food and Nutrition Services Fund and accrues to that fund for the a la carte programs and food that they serve in the Food and Nutrition Services in the cafeterias, obviously. And then another almost $5 million is in our Grants and Restricted Programs Fund. So when you take 5 and 4.5 and then 14, that's almost $24 million. In the School Operating Fund, we have about $3.6 million of local fees. So even if we, for example, chose to hike all of those fees up, right, double those fees, it would generate another $3.6 million. But would we really be able to do that? Probably not.
Except that all the tier 1 cuts are about $3.6 million. And so there's a lot of pain in those tier 1 cuts. If we could, I'm just saying, if we could generate fees to get rid of a tier's worth of cuts, it may be worth doing that, because there's a lot of, we all, as you can hear, are pretty fiscally conservative. And yet when we as a collective committee went and looked at all these cuts, we had more heartburn than I think we thought individually that we would have. And when you really look at the cuts that are in the budget, as you know extremely well, because you put it together, a lot of cuts don't add up to that much money when you're having to put them together $20,000, $30,000, $100,000 at a time. And so even a couple $1 million in fee revenue can save a lot of things that impact a lot of people. That's the only reason I get the magnitude. It's not going to get us to $100 million, but it could save a couple $1 million of things that kids really care about. That's all, especially when you're getting to sports and other activities and some of the things that were on the list. So
I understand, but it would also require doing things such as doubling the Montessori tuition that we charge to our parents for their children in Montessori. We'd have to double it. So we're talking, if we're going to get another $3.6 million, what we're charging right now would have to be doubled. We would have to double what we charge for summer school.
Well, I think what we were suggesting is to look for all the other types of fees. And so you're not doubling what you have right now. You're looking for all the other types that we may not be tapping into yet. That was our suggestion as a committee, is to benchmark ourselves and just figure out what are all the other places. I don't think we charge for curricular band, do we? And maybe we should be charging for band. There's just maybe other types of fees that other people are charging that maybe we should be charging for. Other types of things that are more expensive, and so therefore there maybe should be fees to offset those things that could free up funds for other things so that you're,
I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just want us to keep in perspective that even if we did charge all of the fees that all of our neighboring jurisdictions are charging, we might generate a few $100,000, which is
Okay.
not insignificant, but it's not going to be millions of dollars. That's
Okay.
the only thing I want us to keep in
point
mind.
taken. We don't need to debate this anymore. We wrote our thought, which is we think we should explore it, and we're hearing your point, which is it's not millions, but point taken. Point taken. Okay. Deidre, oh no, Nellie, you were next.
So I'd, just as going back to the option schools, I mean, I'd fully agree that like a wholesale cut of all of them would be an extremely bad idea. But I think just given the deficit in the out years, I think it's necessary to take a look at them because I'm not sure the data is even there right now to evaluate, kind of the cost differences and like just the impact on like performance and who's benefiting, especially since there's this focus on equity. I think it's also important to look at who these programs are benefiting, especially if there's a cost associated with them. And so, that was really, I just wanted to add that to the option school thoughts.
Okay, thank you. That's a good point. Okay, great. Chuck, you're back up. And wait a minute, hang on a second. Juan, I think your hand is still up from before, and then yeah, Nellie's your hand's up and you just went. Okay, Deidre. No, I think Deidre, you're next.
Not to belabor this option program point, but I hear everybody loud and clear that that sure they may need an evaluation. I will note that each, at least through the IPP program, which is the instructional program pathways or pathways program, each option program, at least I know for Spanish immersion, goes through an evaluation every 5 years or something. That could be even up to 10. So that occurs. Now, to the extent that they're weighing benefits in terms of SOL tests, whatever, right, outcomes, just to put one more sort of equity lens in that, we also need to look at, if we're going to get into this, how much option programs actually serve our underserved children and our disadvantaged kids, because sometimes we will often see more diversity in terms of socioeconomic diversity in some of our option programs. So I think that this just gets me to this general, I guess when I go back to the option program position in this paper, the eliminating the option school programs just sounds very stark to me, and it's not backed up with data. So if we do have a point to make that could be backed up with data, meaning option programs cost more because of the transportation costs, then I think we need to be very careful with our language. So it would be consider, charging students on a sliding scale who attend option programs for transportation costs. But the wholesale sort of going into option programs, in my mind, opens a big can of worms that I think there are other parts of APS that look at and examine the efficacy of option programs.
Okay, fair point. Okay, great. Chuck? Chuck, I think you're on mute.
Okay, let's try that again. So Leslie, two-part question, really just one main question, then a follow-up. The compensation increase that we're looking at, was the desired effect of the compensation increase more geared toward retention or competitiveness, where we have areas, based on the comp study, we have certain parts of the scale where we're under market and we have certain parts that are over market. So I guess, was it more about competitiveness or more about retention of staff in terms of how you guys looked at this when you built the budget?
It was really more in terms of trying to make sure that everybody got some form of compensation increase for next year.
Okay.
So I guess you could put that under the heading of retention, but it was really just with a view to ensuring that every single person got a compensation increase.
And is that, I guess, from that then, Leslie, is that just based on the track record that we've had? And in the work study, I know there was a pretty good chart that laid out, what has been done over the past, say, 6 to 7 years, which if folks haven't seen that chart on the back, that's a really good chart to give you a history of what has been done compensation wise, which is important context, I guess. But was that just out of a sense of fairness then, Leslie, that we haven't done something in a while, and this, to just reset the conversation, or more perhaps the promise of to the employees of the system? Was that kind of more your thinking then?
Yeah, it was really looking back to say, okay, we've provided a step for the last 5 years, but if you were on the top of the scale, or if you were on longevity, or in any of the areas of employees that don't get an increase when we provide a step increase, then you haven't gotten something in a long time. And so we wanted to provide that.
Okay, now good context. Thank you.
Leslie, I've got a question for you, and it comes from something in the chat. So I think, Sal, you had said something like fully agree on fees for option schools, anything outside of the standard curriculum, including fees for TJHSST, which I do not advocate eliminating. I think, Leslie, actually, there may be some rule around we can't actually charge. I know you can't actually charge for attending TJHSST. I don't know what the rules are around attending fees for attending option schools. I don't think there's anything around whether or not we charge transportation fees, but I don't know. I do know there's a rule that you couldn't charge a student for attending TJ. That's a Virginia state rule because it's a governor school. I don't know if you know anything around if there's any other rules around fees.
No, I don't know. I mean, obviously you can't charge for a free and appropriate public education, but whether or not an option school would fall under that, I have absolutely no idea.
Okay. Okay, Sal, did you want to add anything to your comment in the chat, or Juan, before I go back to hands?
No, that all kind of just melded together in my brain.
You think you went back on, Sal, I think you went on mute partway through your comment.
So, anyway.
Okay.
You got the gist.
Okay, great. Okay, Catherine, your hand's up. Actually, just put yourself on mute. And then, Catherine, we lost you on view. Maybe you put yourself on video off there too.
Yep. Okay, now we got lights, we got a camera. Okay, okay. So I know we're belaboring this point on fees quite a lot, but I'm concerned that anything that we think is educational, central to the mission of the school, we ought to fund it. And if it's not, then why are we even doing it? So something that's kind of in between, like the other, those marginal sports or something like that. I mean, it's sort of like, so how much of it are we going to fund, and why are we doing it if it's not worth funding, then, or if it requires that cooperation? So it's like, is all the benefit going to the individual participant, in which case they should pay for the whole thing? Or is it actually a part of, the educational process, in which case it really should be funded? And I know it's like, yeah, these are, questionable luxuries, but I want to give a specific example from my sister lives in a place that you have to pay to use the public library on a sliding scale. No problem, right? Sliding scale. Well, my sister, she has a good job and she can pay for it. And she values reading, so she pays her library fee, but the next person who has plenty of money doesn't. And so their kid can't go to the library. It's just something so, that's against the community values of Arlington, I believe. And so she always cites that as this is ridiculous because they're trying to privatize what should be public, because even if people have the money to pay for it, if it's a good thing, they might not, for whatever reason, might not pay it. And so that kid is going to miss out.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to move then. I think we started to get into the revenue and we went from high level into revenue because there was a lot of comments there on revenue. So I'm going to ask before we go into the cuts if there's any more comments on revenue. in addition to any of the other things that people shared here tonight. Any other thoughts on the revenue? The revenue section was budget should make better use of fee revenue. I think we certainly talked about that one quite a bit. School board should continue its conversation with the county. The school board should seek local commercial partnerships and support families with free and reduced lunch applications. That was a specific idea to make better use or to help families who may have one child in the program but not the second, because that seems like that was a theme that was coming up. Bob?
Thank you. Yes, I'll make one other comment about the one we discussed on the athletic fees. It looked like there was a flat rate no matter what sport you were playing, and I'm sure that some sports like football cost a great deal more than something like ultimate frisbee. And charging the same amount for participant in ultimate as you might want to collect from football, basketball, soccer, any of the large team sports that can be quite costly, doesn't seem quite right. I'll just say that that's perhaps an embellishment on that suggestion about fees. Also, there are other aspects like crew. When crew had been proposed a year or two ago for being cut, we learned that a lot of the crew costs are already being paid by an organization. I forget what it's called, but there's an organization that's already established to help defray the cost of crew, which would be an expensive sport as well. So each of those things has unique circumstances of being, just in those three examples, football, very expensive, crew, very expensive, but already set up to have some of those expenses covered, and ultimate frisbee, not expensive whatsoever. So having a one rate may not be the way to go. I'll make one other comment that revenue recommendation is embedded in the long list of tier 1 reductions. It's not put under a separate revenue generating category, and I might recommend that for future budgets. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Okay. Any other hands on revenue? And I have something in the chat. Just give me 1 second. Another point from Deidre to Eric is document reads now, it says consider elimination of option schools. Oh, you went back and forth about the option schools. Need to look at structural changes. One of those structures is local option school program. Okay, I'll make sure that I look at how the document is worded to take into account how the discussion has played out here tonight. Okay, Chuck?
Leslie, if you can just make sure I'm understanding the state funding that was given to us for the COLA increase only applies to the T-scale teaching staff. Is that correct?
No, that was not correct.
Okay, or is that across the board?
Provided to all division instructional and support personnel.
And then I guess from that, is there, given that the state, it's kind of a carrot and a stick, right? It's a bit of an unfunded mandate, but they're going to help us with part of it, but obviously they're not getting us the full way. Is there any expectation beyond this year that there would be any provision from the state to help out with that, or this is just sort of a one-time deal for this year? I guess the assumption going forward is that we're getting a little bit of a help on that this year, but moving forward, there would not be any additional help from the state for that mandate that they put into the recent budget.
Correct.
Okay.
So
thank you.
Yeah. So for example, the General Assembly passed a 5% compensation increase. 5%. It can range from 2 to 5, depending on where you are and what you were able to provide in the first year of the biennium and what you can provide in the second year of the biennium. But for us, for example, a 5% compensation increase, and I'm just using the cost of a COLA because that's the one way we can ensure that everybody gets 5%. For us, that cost is $23 million. The state will provide 1.9 million towards that $23 million. So it puts us in a bad place, because everybody's out there saying, well, the state provided money for a 5% increase, but the reality is for us, no, they didn't. So we have to carry the outsized burden of that. It's a lot. They pay for 8% and we pay for 92%.
And if we don't provide that increase, then we get access to none of the money, correct?
According to the language in the bill, we can, if we provide at least a 2%, then we can access a prorated share of that 1.9 million, which I am assuming at this point is that $658,000 that we had previously, because that was based on 2% in the governor's proposed budget. So we'll see how that works out, and whether or not we can actually maintain the 2% COLA in the budget.
But I guess it would be fair to say that if we chose to go in a different direction on a comp increase, so like the bonus that is talked about, if we didn't do the COLA, then the state money that was provided in the General Assembly budget would be at risk.
Yeah, it would go away. We wouldn't be eligible for it.
Okay, thank you.
Zach?
Yeah, I'd just like to go back to the discussion of the fee, adding the fees to different programs. I think it's important to keep in mind that certain programs already have fees implemented in them to provide for increased services. Like, for example, Bob brought up the example of crew. So many families that have children that participate in crew already are responsible for paying for the costs of like the boating and the travel to different competitions. And like, I'm a band person, so I participate in like a wide variety of activities through that. So, but band is one of the activities that's surprisingly expensive. So for example, we have band dues at the beginning of every year. Like a marimba, for example, which is like a big xylophone for people who are unfamiliar. Like a good one costs about $10,000 to $20,000. So it's important to keep in mind that families are already responsible for paying for some of the costs of the different programs. And so I think that's an important consideration when considering how the fees should be implemented for different activities.
Very, very fair points. Thank you, Zach. Good addition. Thank you. Okay, great. Anything else on the fees before we're going to change? We're going to switch gears and we're going to go to input on expenses. Okay, we're going to input on expenses. So the headlines here were that we understood that we have the need for reductions, but that we did have certain things we wanted to point out. But obviously, as you can see, as we put our collective ideas together, this list did get a little long. And I wanted folks to look at it. We did soften the language a little bit, right? So we didn't say that every single thing we put on the list, we wanted to take off the collective list, because I think that would probably go against our message that we needed to we needed to be mindful of the deficit and make some changes. But I did want people to see everything that everyone flagged. And so I did put it all on the list, everything that everyone flagged. So I do want to get some input on this section from folks. And so we can do it tier by tier. We can get some overall comments, and then we'll go tier by tier. But I want you all, hopefully you all did see that we did have a good number of suggestions at the end of almost our own replacement tier. But we did take a lot of things collectively, or make some suggestions about quite a few things. So I'll take suggestions now on this section. Eric? Oh, actually, hang on one second, Eric, before you start, because there's one chat item I just want to make sure. Yes, okay. So Zach Sal is agreeing with you. Okay, let me go back, and Eric, you're next.
Yeah, I mean, it's a general comment on some of these items, and I think it's worth stressing up front is purely from an equity perspective. I think we need to really look hard at anything that would impact something like summer school, where I think that's where some kids are going to need that extra help to catch up, and we know that impacts a certain segment of our population more than others, and anything that's going to cut into summer school or reduce summer school, I think is an equity challenge for us that we need to be upfront about.
And I'll just say, Eric, because one of the things I struggle with, and Leslie said she's going to stay off the camera for a little bit, but maybe she can help us with this. One of the things I struggled with when I read this is, there was a lot of money in the budget. And I know this because unfortunately I've gone through this exercise at more than one company I've worked at. There is often money that can be cut and people that can be moved around. And so you can actually continue to deliver something even when you cut money in a budget. And so it's hard for me to know in any one of these things, like, is the money that's being cut here actually going to hurt a program or not? Right now, if you're cutting an activity, you're saying, I'm just cutting this sport, or I'm cutting this activity, or I'm cutting this program out, then obviously that program is gone. But in something like, I'm not going to hire a summer school coordinator because you think maybe, you know what, I can cover this with staff I have. I don't know if that's going to hurt. I'm just using that because you brought it up first. I don't know if that's going to hurt. Another one that I flagged was the employee assistance program. I'm working in behavioral health right now. I know there's a huge spike in people needing behavioral health support, but I don't know if the money they cut out of the employee assistance program is actually going to hurt the delivery of that program. It may not, right? It may not have a material impact, and therefore that cut may be just fine for next year. So it's actually very hard to tell in this section what is going to have a material impact on the delivery of the program or not. And this is where I don't know, Leslie, and I'm sorry, you were going to stay off camera for a little bit, and now I didn't mean to page you back. You can also answer this without being on camera. If you want to just give us a little bit of input here as we are talking through this, because I think and I don't want to stifle the conversation. I want you all to give me what your thoughts and priorities are, and I'm going to take notes. But as we started this section, I thought it was worth just Leslie giving us some input, not so much on that one, but on the way to think about this. And then I want to, go back in my box to writing notes and have you all give me your thoughts, because that was the intention of this section. Okay, go ahead, Leslie.
That's such a loaded question.
Or there isn't one answer to.
I will say, from my perspective, I put things on the table that some were a little bit easier than others, but when it comes to, for example, the two positions that I had in the FY21 budget reductions that were put back, and then I had to come up with 5 to 6% of my overall budget to put on the table. I had to put those positions up again because I don't have anything else in my budget to give up. And even giving up those positions is causing some consternation in my department about, okay, what are we going to do if we don't have these positions? And the answer is, well, everybody's going to have to take on more work, which is hard because all of my staff is working very, very hard right now, and we haven't had really increases in our department in the same way that other areas of the school division have been increasing. So it's been hard. I would say that for the most part, the cuts that were put on the table are going to hurt. Some may hurt more than others. Anything that was easy to take has been taken over the last several years, especially on the department side. And so and we look every year, like we ask and we sit with every department and go through what's in the base of their budget and say, okay, we're looking at this account and this account and this account. You didn't use the money in that account. Do you need it in that account? These accounts were over budget last year. Are we budgeting it in the right place? Are we using the funds correctly? We do that every year with every department. Now, we don't know exactly what every single thing is that is being purchased in every single line item, but we too try to work with every department to say, if you have money in your base that's not being used for for anything or for things that it was intended for, then it should be put towards those things that you need, so that you don't ask for anything new, right? Move the money around, shift the positions, do what you can. And we've done a lot of that already. So some will be easier than others. Some will really cause a change in service delivery.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Okay, thank you. Okay, Eric, did you have anything else there, or shall I go on to the next person? Okay, Nellie.
When I had listed the school trips, sort of had envisioned something along the lines of what Melanie had just mentioned, where the cost goes from being paid for by APS to something else, because when it was listed under Tier 1, there were some options listed there for other places where the money could come from. I wouldn't advocate for removing the trips entirely and having them just not happen, simply because they seem like such a key part of child's school experience. But I did also have a comment that kind of is relevant to this particular cut, because it lists the PTA, and given the wide disparity in PTA funds, that doesn't seem like an appropriate place to have the money come from instead, because if one school's auction does really well and another one doesn't, for example, does that mean that school gets trips and the other one doesn't? I mean, it just seems, I don't know how we would fix that. I just don't know how that would be overcome. So, yeah, that was a thought that occurred to me.
And they are, just a thought, I actually talked to Reed about this one, and they are trying to work on a common pool of PTA. So I think if you could actually say that everyone gives to a common pool of PTA, obviously you give more if you raise more, and that this comes out of the common pool and everyone gets to split it equally, then if you did something like that, it would be worth it. But I agree that you wouldn't want to do it and say that the schools that make money at their auctions get trips and the ones that don't. So you'd have to figure that out. But we can talk to Reed a little bit more about this next week, because one of the things as he thought about equity and funding and the different elements of it that he was talking about when I talked to him in advance about his equity funding formula. Thank you, Nellie.
Thank you.
And by the way, my son's going to be relieved. He looked over my shoulder and he saw the trips suggestion, and he was just so upset. He'll be so relieved to hear that we're going to walk that back or make a different suggestion. Deandra, you're next.
Hey, so something just immediately on Nellie's point and your point, Melanie. I do think that elimination of trips altogether does create potential inequities, because what you'll see, I know for a fact, is that a PTA, exactly like Nellie said, that can raise $100,000 on its auction will then fund every possible excursion a student could attend. I've seen it, I know it happens. What Reed is talking about is there is a CCPTA, it's a county council on PTAs. They have a grant program by which individual schools can apply for help, right? And everybody puts into this program. That's the idea, but everybody doesn't, but that's the idea. So yes, there is the ability for sort of all PTAs to crowdsource these things, but I think we get into a terrible sort of, I guess, personally, I would never want to just sort of rely on a PTA in a budget document, because I think that just passes the buck too much. And creates many, many potential issues for equity in a county that already struggles with equity. So this segues into my second point, and that is for the two DEI, for the two equity pieces here, which is really amounts to just 100,000. There's a little nugget that I think needs to be highlighted better, and that is before any of these DEI efforts begin, there needs to be an equity audit, period. There hasn't been an equity audit of the budget at all. So, even the savings of 100,000 and then an equity audit of 30,000 only gives us a net of 70. But I think it's just, it's part of the budget and planning process that you would do things sequentially in that order. And then finally, Melanie, the one thing that I would say on summer school staffing, I wholeheartedly agree that there's many times that I see cuts from budgets, at least with APSs, but I don't see like an adding back, so to speak, meaning if families were to fund this on a sliding scale, right, what would it look like? In fact, we took major hits to summer school just a few years ago, and a lot of parents were upset about the fact that they were never even offered the ability to pay for it. So that, again, I think is a nice place where we can segue into sort of this, it's not pay to play, but in a year where parents really need the break, a lot of kids need to catch up. We do have some families that can afford to pay. It seems to me that there could be a payment sort of structure invited there as well.
Okay, thank you on both comments. Thank you. Okay. Nellie, is your hand still up from before, or or no? Or is it up again?
Can I clarify?
Oh, yes, you can. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm eating dinner, guys. Sorry. Deidre, can I ask you to clarify when you say that? Talk about the charging of parents for summer school. For there's remediation summer school, right? And then there's enrichment summer school. I'm assuming that you're talking about the enrichment piece of the summer school. Okay, because it has always been our goal that the enrichment piece of summer school pays for itself. It's everything else that costs, so much money.
Yeah, so that's what I'm alluding to, is the fact that it was cut, I think a few years ago, right? But I think a lot of parents were sort of like, oh, well, if we could have paid for it, we would have liked that option. And so I was just thinking more broadly about summer school in general and what we offer and the option for parents to pay, even though I know at this point it's just remedial.
The option for parents to pay for more than remedial summer school.
I'm sorry, to offset the summer school staffing piece on the remedial.
We can't charge for remedial summer school.
Okay, fair. Then take it off. Thanks, Melanie.
Okay.
Thank
Sorry,
you,
that's
Leslie.
why I was trying to clarify, because by state code, we are not allowed to charge for remedial summer school.
Thanks, Leslie.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And Leslie, are we contemplating any enrichment summer school, or is it all, are we contemplating only remedial summer school this year?
I honestly don't know. I know that they're working through what that model is going to look like. And I know what I've seen in drafts, but I don't know where they are right now. And I'd hate to speak out of turn on that. So
Leslie, that's
coming soon, I think.
Yeah, I heard somebody give an update on it last night, and they've said that it is coming soon and they need to rush to get it out. But it sounded like it was going to be, at least to start, definitely focused on the remedial, and the enrichment was a nice to have at best. I think they were very concerned about staffing and having enough teachers that could step in and cover what we might want to do.
Yes, that is going to be a very, very, very large concern for us this year, especially if we expand summer school to provide additional resources to students so we can get, kind of get them caught up before we start in the fall. And I'm sure that there are any number of teachers who in any other year would have been happy to work summer school who are like, no way, Jose, I am not working summer school this year. So we're going to be in that let's see how that works out kind of place. We're going to try and put as many resources as we can into summer school and provide as much as we can for students, but the staffing piece does remain to be seen.
Monique, you popped on. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yes,
Please do.
I appreciate the opportunity because I do recall having to take the tough vote about summer school in the past when we stopped, I think it was about 2 years ago, with offering the enrichment classes and some of the things people were very used to. And I believe that when assistant or interim superintendent Johnson brought that up, she shared that we were doing that because we needed our best teachers focused on our kids who had the most needs, and that by offering additional enrichment classes, that really diluted the pool, and we needed those teachers really working with our students who had the most need. So that is where I believe the decision came to not offer those enrichment classes previously. And so Leslie has already addressed the aspect of we are going to need our teachers, probably all hands on deck to help those kids who perhaps have fallen behind.
Thank you, Monique. Okay. Other comments, Bob? Your hand is still up, but I think it's up from before because I don't think it went down. Or it's up again? Okay.
Yes, it's up again.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing about the cancellation of enrichment schools, I guess I was now surprised to hear that all along we intended to make them pay for themselves, yet we still deleted them. I thought, it wasn't as part of a budget cycle that went through. That was outside of the budget cycle. But I hear what you say, Monique, about having some of the better teachers dedicated towards the remedial rather than the enrichment. I wonder whether that worked out or whether, did you get those teachers to shift over? Or I don't know, Monique, you may not know this, but the question to ask is whether those teachers indeed shifted over to the remedial rather than the enrichment. I don't know that they would have. So it looks to me, unless that really worked out, the cancellation of a part of the summer enrichment program that's supposed to be paying for itself was likely a failure. I don't know that can be fixed now because I do hear you, Leslie. I think this year more than any, people are going to be looking to travel when they haven't been able to do that for a whole year or something too. So they're not going to dedicate their summer just as the economy's opening up again. I agree that's going to be tough to get the teachers. But I guess I'm just a little bit surprised to hear that all along the enrichment program, summer school programs were supposed to pay for themselves, and yet we canceled it. I didn't like when we did.
I want to clarify. I said our goal was for those programs to pay for themselves, but when the fees go to the school board for approval, there are times when the school board says, we think those fees are too high and we shouldn't be charging them. So the proposal is then changed.
Right. So I guess what was done instead was the whole thing was thrown out. So
Okay. Okay. I have something in the chat. Okay. No open questions, just in chat. Okay, other thoughts and suggestions on cuts or expense or our input on expenses? Chuck? Are you on mute?
Yeah, my head is up, yeah, it's not where it needs to be today. Curious other folks' thoughts on this nature of class size, given that, there is some disparity across the county, school to school on the class sizes. Obviously we have some schools coming online and they have to be staffed. So there's really, there's nothing there really much to discuss, but if we think about the big enough levers we need to pull to make the cuts required if necessary to close a deficit, there aren't really going to be a lot of them that we can pull. Just curious other thoughts on, are there other approaches with respect to maybe class size, or, just curious what other folks' thoughts are on whether that would be publicly acceptable to allow a little bit of growth, or, are we kind of tilting at a windmill when it comes to, looking at this issue of class sizes? It affects, the number of FTEs we need to man the schools adequately and have the educational experience that we do expect in our system.
I don't know if how do I say this? I know that there's some concern that has been expressed regarding what our enrollment projections are for next year. And one of the budget questions that we have from board members, Dr. Cannon specifically, is, what would we be able to, should we increase class size as a hedge against our enrollment projections being too high? And if we increase class size, by 2 or 3 or whatever, and our enrollment comes in less than we've projected, and significantly less, then our class sizes will end up on average about where they are right now-ish, right? So we have a budget question on that we'll be answering, but that has been proposed as kind of a possible mitigation strategy for the uncertainty this year. All enrollment projections are uncertain, but usually we're pretty close, 1% plus or minus. This year, we just don't know. We took our best shot, and by best shot I don't mean we just threw darts at a dartboard. We have our demographer consultant who was with us, and he works with school districts across the country. They're all experiencing the same kind of uncertainty around projections for next year, because almost to a man, school districts have seen that drop in enrollment, and now are trying to figure out what's going to happen next year. And so, we took the best shot that we could based on a lot of science and a little bit of art, and that's what we have. And there are some concerns, and I totally get it, that we might not meet those projections next year, and it's understandable. So that was one of the suggestions.
Thank you, Leslie. Juan?
Yes, in line with what Chuck has just said, I think we're looking at the total spectrum of possible or tentative budget cuts, but to look at the big impact and the big picture here, I think, everybody's adamant about giving the COLA increases and the raises this year, but have we gauged the teachers, and maybe Josh and Leslie can add on to this to make a determination if we increase class sizes, what is their feelings about that? If class sizes were increased by 3, I think we got to look at some big picture item to have the impact on the cuts that we really want with the least amount of frustration to everyone.
Josh, did you want to weigh in here from the teacher perspective?
Just like, I guess one of my, and I've said this example to people of, yes, it's certainly a way to do it, right? You could raise class size by 3. But the thing I say to people often in this 535-page budget is we didn't get here $40 million at a time. We got here $100,000 at a time over and over and over. And you can do that. I mean, it's going to be a killer and people are going to certainly look around. It not something you would get as a recommendation out of me. I could say other things like I think the county should be kicking in more money as a percentage of their budget, given all of the constraints and the expenses that are an area that is as urbanized as us. I don't know if I can go much higher than that, but to say I do appreciate the conversations when we do go looking at things 100,000 at a time, and when you say things like, could this get spread out over a few years? So did I answer the question in a way you were looking for? But it's just,
you don't love that one, Josh. I think that's what we heard.
I think that's a hard question all the way around. But thank you, Josh, for your input.
Yeah, but I think it's also a nature of what the actual class size increase would be. And honestly, at Wood schools, I mean, that class size increase is not going to be something that the county school by school would experience uniformly. I don't know if we even have any predictive power to know where we might even see a potential class size increase. I don't know to what precision we could even get to that. But I don't think it would be uniformly spread throughout the county either.
And I think we should also benchmark ourselves, which is, again, we should go benchmark and figure out where are we at the bottom of the pack, where are we in the middle of the pack, where are we at the top of the pack, and that helps inform what should our class sizes look like.
Yeah. Are there some schools where we could take risk because they're better performing? I mean, I just exploring, are there different ways that we could attack that problem given its outsized nature on the budget overall?
Okay, I'm going to ask the group a little different question, which is, given now that you see we have a particularly long list in tier 1 of things that we wanted to reconsider, and that was actually the tier that's coming off first. We do have a list in tier 2 as well. What I want to see is, does anyone have a thought? Maybe they put something forward and they might say, you know what, given the fact of how long our list is, they either wanted to propose it to come off. You can't propose somebody else's suggestion to come off, but you can propose your own suggestion to come off. Or I guess you can propose somebody else's because nobody really knows what you put forward. But I will say, I think that is one of the things that we should be thinking about. Are there things that we could live with collectively coming off the list, or at least that we could we could think about if only 1 or 2 people wanted them on the list, if those people, like looking at the length of this list, said, this is something that, looking at the length of the list, I don't feel as strongly about. I already X'd one of mine where I know I was the only person who put it forward, and so I've X'd one of mine off looking at the length of the list. And you don't have to do that tonight, meaning people can certainly feel free to raise their hand on something and say, hey, I put this forward. I don't know if anyone else did, and I would be comfortable with it coming off, and I'll note it. I'll know where multiple people put something forward or not. You can also do that. I will call, if you feel too shy to do that here, or you're not sure how many people put it forward, or you want to go back and look at what you sent me, I can also entertain those comments in the next couple of days. And then I can look and reconcile and say, okay, thanks. You were the only person who put that forward. And so therefore I will take that off the list, and our list of things that we might want the board to reconsider would shrink a little bit. So I do encourage people to just think again about that, given kind of the list of things we want to be reconsidered sort of doesn't jive completely with our top line message of the fact that we do think that there needs to be some change on here. So any other thoughts in terms of the considerations in tier 1 and tier 2, which are really where our things we want them to reconsider live? Jen?
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about the Montessori? I'll admit it's a program I don't know a whole lot about, but it's a big number. So if we have it back here, can we at least spend a few minutes talking about that one?
Yes. Okay, make sure I have it.
Like I said, it's just, I don't have an opinion on it because I read what was there, but I don't have any personal experience with Montessori.
Yeah, and the suggestion that I got was not to take it off the list for cut, but to actually make it a permanent cut to basis so it doesn't pop back next year.
Got it.
So
okay.
It's not a take 600,000, put it back in the budget, but instead take 600,000 and make it a permanent cut. And so you don't see it back on the list next year. It has to be recut. That was the suggestion I got. And that's actually slightly confusing here. And maybe I should call that out and make it a little different because this was just a tier 1 list. I think now with Nellie's comment around the field trips and she's retracting her comment on that. She was the one who made the field trip comment, that comment will come off. This would be the only one on that section that is like that. And therefore, if it remains like that on the list, I might either leave it out or put it in a different section so no one thinks that we're actually suggesting that one come back in, because that is a little bit confusing there. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts or suggestions about that one, but certainly I can make that one more clear.
Where is this? It's on the tier 1?
Yeah, it's partway down. So I think it's you have to flip the next page, but it's in the tier 1 in my comments on the second page of my comments.
Oh, okay. That's right. That's right.
I listed in the order. This was challenging, but I listed in the order that they were found in the budget. I did not receive them that way because you were all sending me your own comments, but I tried to make the titles match and the numbers match. So
got it.
You all give me a little bit of a puzzle there because you didn't all send your comments that way. Okay, does that answer your question then, Jen?
Yeah, thanks. And I guess while I'm talking, the other just thought I would make is, for some of these positions, like these summer school ones, I'm wondering if there is a way to fill them with something that isn't a permanent position, right? Thinking about the future, and not just for the summer school positions, but for any positions that we're kind of looking at. Are there creative ways to fill those with other people, or I have no idea, but again, looking towards, we don't want to just add more headcount that we have to pay them more money every year, right? That we can't afford to do. So if there's some creative solutions for some of these positions to be covered in other ways.
Okay, great. Interesting suggestion. Thank you. Lisa, so I think Juan and Jen, your hands are still up, but Lisa, you would be next.
One, I wasn't opposed to basically any cut on that list. There were things that I thought, and could we have a list that goes, cut this anyway, even if we were to have all the money? Could we start a list that?
There was that suggestion in the top where actually it said in the top, even if you get the American Recovery Act money, and we should not use all of our reserves. And so that comment was made at the top of the document.
Okay.
And then and my section 4 or 5 or whatever it's called, other cuts, has a list of probably a dozen more other cuts that we would make that we're suggesting as well. So we went further. If you have others, please do send them to me.
Okay. And then this hasn't been addressed at all, is the whole thing with the superintendent and his adding another layer of leadership. And although it comes in looking like it's only $110,000 more, that's because 2 or 3 people from the Department of Teaching and Learning, and based on the way things seem to work in this county, I must think that they are retiring as opposed to they're being fired. But you know, theoretically, that would have been those positions we would be saving, because if we're thinking that we're going to get these new people and only add 110, the money that we wouldn't be paying them would have been a savings right off the top. And then there was another person that was in the Department of Teaching and Learning who looks like they've done something, and they would get a change of their title and $10,000 more to do what looked like a significant amount more work. And I think we need to be encouraging that. And that's in there to be a tier 2 reduction if it were to happen.
Can you send me, I'm aware of, and I do have a note in here about the fact that I think that the reorg should be budget neutral. And so I didn't point out what you went a little further and said, actually, you should save those heads. But I went ahead and pointed out that I thought the reorg should be budget neutral and not cost $110,000. So that point is in there under other reductions. So I know where that is. The second thing you're talking about, can you send me a note as to what you're talking about so I can reference it? Just send me an email. So
Yeah, I didn't see it, and I thought I put it on my list of things that I sent you. So I will have to see what happened to that.
Okay, yeah, please do, because I don't think I received it.
Okay. Wait a minute, you didn't get a thing from me?
I did not.
Oh, yeah, I had a whole thing. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm not sure what happened. Stuck in the outbox. Please
right.
Look. I welcome anything that you have.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay. Looking for other. Okay, so and that brings me to, if anyone has any additional cuts, as you can see, there is that other reductions consideration, which has 1, 2, 3, or 4 other pages long, which is other things that we identified. So welcome any additional comments there. If people have it, again, it helps to offset if there are things that people feel that are really important in the top. The school board has to make the ultimate decisions. We're just showing what we as the budget committee feel like our priorities and where we would make our trade-offs as another set of input for them. So welcome anyone else's comments, like Lisa's, where she has a couple of ideas for me, which unfortunately looks like I don't have, but I will, in this next round, make sure that I get into the document. And if there's anyone else who feels like they don't see their suggestions in here, please check to make sure that your stuff got sent, because I did incorporate everything I got.
Okay. Melody, I wanted to ask Leslie if she could comment on the legal contracts. Is there any way that those could be actually cut this year? Have they taken an analysis of what are the past issues those legal contracts dealt with, and are they making any adjustments this year?
Leslie, you want to speak to that? And you mean the legal costs overall, Juan? Is that what you mean? The legal costs that led to sourcing of counsel?
Correct.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not sure I followed your question, Juan. I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
The legal costs come in around $600,000 each year. And I was just trying to find out, had any type of analysis been done to look at cutting those costs in the upcoming year, or is that something that's just standard each year?
The legal costs are based on the actual costs are based on how much we use outside legal counsel. So we're not paying $600,000 a year regardless of what's happening. We're paying what we use. So if we use it less one year, then we pay less. If we use it more one year, then we pay more. The fact remains that our legal costs have been going up every year, partly in the special education arena, partly just because there's so much going on that we feel we need to have legal advice more often than we might otherwise have needed. But we haven't done an analysis of how to reduce those costs, because we don't access those costs unless we have to. So I don't know how we would reduce needing legal counsel on issues as the issues arise every year.
I just saw it as a pattern where it was averaging around 600,000 each year, and I was like, okay, is there some type of standard activity that is being gauged in each year to be?
Yeah.
I think 2 years was around 600, and 1 year was around 700,000. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no, they're all just actual costs that come as we use the legal counsel each year.
Okay. Catherine?
Yeah, in the other cuts, there's that thing about the American Sign Languages and other like small enrollment curriculum. And with all of the experience gained in, sorry, Josh, all the teachers have all this experience now in remote delivery of teaching. And is there any, if anybody knows what's going on in other areas about making more use of online teaching, where like MOOC type teaching, so that one preparation for all the schools, or other efficiencies in using remote and virtual training methods, so you get more, our live teachers can do their thing, but like the actual lectures and such can be taken care of by technology.
Josh, you want to talk about that one?
So a lot on that. Let me make sure I'm facing the right screen. So there's a lot of conversation about, because for a percentage of the students, this is working. And in the IPP, there is a small amount of a proposal to start looking at doing some of this online teaching. This is me talking as a person, not as representing the AEA. I actually wrote up a little 2-pager of what this might look like to go all in Arlington and offer a virtual option, if for no other reason than to manage class size. Not class size, but capacity issues. That if you had a certain percentage of kids voluntarily choose to learn at home, that we could manage our need for new buildings. So, I mean, there are teachers very interested in doing that kind of work. I don't know if that answered the question you were looking for.
Okay.
I mean, that's not a discussion that we have in these 3-4 weeks of the budget process, but definitely, I've got to imagine that 3 or 5 years from now, we have a lot of these type of elements that you're talking about, Josh. And of course, there's a big cost for the initial development of it, but then all the other, transportation, building, and even repetitive elements of the teaching can be developed, for once, and then the teachers can.
Well, I'm using technology differently now in ways that I intend to use differently. Yeah. And I hope we don't wait 3 to 5 years on that, because you're right, there's a whole lot of experience in trial by fire that in 3 to 5 years, it would be a shame to just go right back to what we were doing, because for some, what we were doing wasn't a panacea either.
Yeah. And Catherine, we did put that in our fall suggestions, and we can put that in our end of year report again too. Okay. And we're closing in on time, so just a few more comments, but Bob?
Yes, thank you. Leslie, do we know how much that general counsel's office is going to cost once it is staffed?
I believe the cost is outlined in the budget document.
I was looking for it. I couldn't find it. Is it?
Well, it says $140,000 more than it was last year. So $140,000 is the amount is going to cost more than our last legal fees.
Okay, where is that? Do you know offhand? And while you're looking for it,
go ahead.
Oh, I didn't put a page number.
Okay. So I'll just make the observation that rather than, as you answered the question before, the legal costs are as needed as it is now. And then we will be converting it to an annual set amount, basically, because we will have staffed that.
No, we actually don't believe that we will do away with all outside legal counsel. What we're trying to do is to build as robust an office as we can to handle the most issues that we can, but there are still going to be certain things that we will not be able to handle within that office. So we will have to rely on outside counsel still.
So but it's still going to cost $140,000 more. I mean, it would be a good explanation if you say, well, we'll hire to cover our base amount, and then we'll contract out just for peaking power, for the parts that we can't cover. But if it's already going to cost us $140,000 more than we normally pay, that doesn't sound like it's a consistent explanation.
The prediction is that it's going to cost $140,000 more next year because it'll be the first year. We don't have any experience with an in-house general counsel office, so we don't have any idea at this point exactly how much of the work that we provide to outside counsel right now that office will be able to take on. We're hoping that what we find is that they take on a lot more than we thought they could, and that it will actually help to reduce the current level of costs. But as I said before, our legal costs have been increasing every single year, and we don't expect that trend to stop. So we're doing a little bit of trying to mitigate the costs that we're incurring right now, plus some of the costs that we will incur a little bit into the short-term future. But we don't believe that our general counsel office will be able to replace all of the costs that we are taking up right now. It's possible that they'll do a lot more than we think that they will, but you don't build a budget saying, okay, we're not going to have any outside legal services. It's all going to be handled in-house, and then find that you need $300,000 or $400,000, 2 months into the budget. You build the budget conservatively, and then when you get some experience under your belt, since we've never had an in-house general counsel office, and a lot of it will depend on the skills and abilities of the people that we hire into those positions. We will see what happens in the first year, and then we might have some changes for the FY23 budget.
Hey, Leslie, do you think you could cap that expenditure off maybe around 300,000?
The outside counsel?
Yes.
No.
So
no, because when we have litigation or when we have matters that come up that require legal counsel, and special education is a perfect example. When we need legal counsel in a special education case, we have to have legal counsel.
Right.
If the people that we hire, for whatever reason, we can't hire people that have that specific legal experience of special education in a school setting, then we will have to continue to use outside counsel. And we can't say, oh, we can't hire legal counsel because we've run through our $300,000 budget, so I guess we won't do anything. We have to have legal counsel in those cases. So I would say that, we can't cap our outside counsel. What we can do is try our best to hire those people into the division counsel office that have that depth and not depth, but breadth of experience that we need to cover as much as we can of those outside counsel costs, but there will still be outside counsel costs.
Okay. So you have an anticipation that those costs may go up additional 100,000 based on the staffing of that particular office this year overall?
What we did was we didn't reduce the budget for our outside counsel by the sum total of what that office is going to cost us next year. So the office is going to cost X. We reduced our legal services budget by Y, but X doesn't equal Y because we knew we would need to still have a budget for outside legal counsel next year.
Okay, we only have 3 minutes, so I'm going to just say really quickly, Nellie and Deidre, you're lined up, but can you make your comments very quickly so that I can make 1 minute of final comments? So Nellie, is it a quick comment? You're on mute.
Yeah, could it actually go second? I need to find the comment that I had.
Oh, okay, no problem. Deidre, can you make a very quick last comment, or did you put your hand down?
I withdraw my comment.
Oh,
I
okay.
withdraw.
Great. Okay, great. I'm just going to say then, as Nellie's finding her comment, like I said, I'm going to send a note. I'm going to ask for any additional comments. I've noted all of your comments tonight. I'm going to ask for any additional comments by noon on Saturday. And so if you can all prioritize sending me anything else you want to tell me about this document so I can incorporate the comments from tonight's discussion and anything else, because I'll be working on it Saturday afternoon. To get it all out to you again so that we can finalize our discussion next Wednesday night. We'll have a final discussion on this. It'll only be half the meeting or a little bit less, and we will have Reed Goldstein for the other half of the meeting talking about equity funding formulas, which is an idea for future budgets. But we will have one more additional hour to talk about it. But please, everyone send me their comments, and if there's any other comments that were missed, that didn't get sent out, please send those as well, because we'll have one more chance to incorporate and discuss before this gets finalized. So Nellie, did you want to make your last comment or question for the group?
Yeah, I had a super fast question for Leslie, if she knows off the top of her head. On page 130 for the reductions in summer school accounts, there's a comment about no longer providing light refreshments during late registration events. And I was wondering whether that was for the staff or for parents who are, people who are coming to sign up.
It's for staff because typically they work a 12 to 14-hour day that day. They're there early in the morning and then they're there till late at night.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So appreciate all of you reading the budget quickly, sending comments, participating in tonight's discussion in such a constructive way. Leslie, thank you very much for all of your input. Really appreciated it. And Monique, really appreciated your being here as well tonight. So thank you all for this. And one more discussion next week, agenda and documents coming out over the weekend. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Good night.